Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Today's first experience on the paranormal side. I remember as a little girl always being in tune with the paranormal. Seeing my grandfather and his mom, who I never met, was a common occurrence as a child, as they had died in this family home. As of today, the home is 100 years old. My great-grandfather built it with the money he had earned from owning a gambling den and pool hall. It was a humble home. In that time, 4 people died in that home, from old age, sickness, alongside of countless pets. However, there was this horrible aura of seething hatred that resided in the home. Ever since I was young, the house instilled a sense of grave fear. I could always feel a horrible presence. Many house guests over the years would also complain about feeling something evil nearby. My mom, brother, and myself would see a haunting black shadow figure with piercing red eyes. However, it wasn't truly human in appearance. It had a long, featureless face, long, gnarly fingers, and a tall body that would contort. You could always tell when he was watching you, even when he did not manifest. He would call your name in the day and at night, distinct male voice, hence why I call him a he. When he would manifest, you would see him either on the ground crouching and cocking his head at you. His hands pry open doors, and yes, they would open enough for him to peer at you with those eyes. And he'd cling to walls like Spider-Man and stare at you while slowly making his way towards you. He would back away and look confused if you spoke to him or asked for help. I believe he has caused physical harm to myself and others. My father and my ex-husband would feel someone sitting on them, strangling them at night. Once I awoke with scratches on my face after seeing him in my bed. He has traumatized me for years since I had insomnia. My mother for years was convinced someone sent a demon after her, but it never followed her or us when we moved. He cannot leave that house. I live next door now in another home my family has built. You can feel and occasionally see him stare at you from the windows when you're outside of the house. Especially at 3 a.m. You don't feel his presence and sense of dread until you enter the threshold. My husband feels it every time he goes to visit, and has been the one time he slept over almost 6 years ago. We were talking about him last night, and my husband mentioned in detail what I used to see and his behavior. He, of course, had to insult the creature when he was creeping towards us by calling him an ugly demon. But he has seen worse. That apparently confused him. He left him alone after that. Over the decades, the house has been blessed by priests. But he remains watching, instilling fear and calling you. We don't know what he is or how to get rid of it. I feel like something ties him to our family. My gut tells me he was murdered a long time ago and still tries to instill the same fear he felt when he was dying. Today's second experience on the paranormal side. This happened to me as a teen. I believe I was 16 years old at the time. My sister and I were having two friends stay over for a sleepover one night. It was in the middle of summer, and we lived in a tiny town, actually a hamlet. We were surrounded by prairies, lots of farmland, so it was pretty flat. My sister and one of the friends fell asleep fairly early that night, but my other friend and I stayed awake chatting for ages. We had our mattress on the floor right by the three big windows in my sister's room. It's a two-story home. These windows looked out onto the street, and then across the street was an elementary school, a parking lot for that school, and then right next to the parking lot was a farmer's field. So the field was more towards our right, the school more towards the left, and the parking lot directly in the middle, if you were looking out the window from inside. So we stay up chatting until about 3 in the morning. The windows are wide open, there's a lovely warm breeze coming in. Suddenly my friend abruptly stops the conversation and says something like, "Oh, who's that?" I follow her gaze and see she's looking towards the farmer's field. I see two figures coming out of the field. It's obviously dark and they haven't yet come into the street light, so I cannot make out any features yet. But I assume it's just some kids in the neighborhood. My friend and I continue to watch in silence as these two people make their way into the streetlight and start coming towards the house. Now I really assume it's someone I know because there's a few teen boys that would often be out late and would come to the house and talk to me and my sister from the window. So they're getting closer, and then we began to make out an appearance, and I was truly shocked at how they looked. These two individuals couldn't have been taller than 5 feet. They were identical in all features we could make out. And I mean absolutely identical. They were both Caucasian colored. They both had totally bald heads. And they were both wearing the same long brown robe. How I would describe it is sort of like monks. They were proportionally as well. No big heads, no big eyes. They just look like little people. Even though they clearly don't look like anyone I know, they're coming towards the house. I began to call out to them in sort of a loud whisper, "Hey, hey, hey you!" Then I start yelling out names of different people in the town that I knew. I think I was a bit in disbelief and creeped out, and thought maybe it was a prank. All the while my friend is totally stunned into silence. These beings make it just to my parents' car parked outside, so we have a very clear view of them. And then they immediately turn on themselves and go back into the direction toward the field. They never once acknowledged my calls. They didn't even look up. But they also appeared to be in discussion with each other, though my friend and I didn't make out any sounds coming from them. We continued to watch them make their way back across the road, and then instead of going back into the field, they started walking down the road. We watched them until we could no longer see them. If you follow that specific road, it just leads to more fields and away from the houses. My friend and I stayed up for another hour talking about what we had seen. She's very Christian and believes it was demonic. I have no idea. It very well could have been demonic, but also it was just so random. The next day we told everyone and they were all kind of freaked out, even my parents. I have so many questions. Why did they come towards my house, only to then turn back to themselves? Why were their appearances absolutely identical? Why bald, short? Why brown robes? And also, what's up with being out at 3 in the morning in a field? I have Googled, and I have not been able to find much. I did find an obscure YouTube video of a lady saying that she was visited by 7 beings that sounded exactly what my friend and I saw, but I haven't found anything else. This lady just said they were interdimensional beings that know the future. Today's third experience on the paranormal side. I'm a 22-year-old university student. I'm male. I live in Fez, Morocco, where the university that I study in is located. A few days ago, I was at a public cafe studying for exams, and I was leaving for home when I ran into a friend, mid-eye. After the usual "hello, how are you," he told me something weird had happened to him. As he was walking to the cafe to meet me, he passed by an old abandoned villa situated on a small street behind the cafe. The villa is old and is surrounded by a 1.5 meter long wall that is further supported by a 2 meter long steel fence. On top of that, the villa itself can only be viewed partially because of vegetation behind the fence, old trees, untrimmed plants, the usual horror story stuff. As he was walking past the villa, my friend was called by a weird, creepy guy from beyond the fence. When he approached the guy, he gave him a piece of candy rolled inside of a piece of paper, as well as another piece of paper folded neatly and covered entirely in Scotch tape. My friend thought it was weird, but didn't think much of it. As he continued to walk, he unwrapped the piece of candy just to check it and see if it was actually candy, but threw it away. And then he moved to the scotched up piece of paper. After struggling with the tape a bit, he managed to open and unfold it. To be surprised by the weird assortment of letter symbols and hard to decipher words in Arabic. In my culture, these things are taken very seriously, and the majority of Moroccans believe this stuff is real and it works. So my friend, who studies Islamic jurisprudence, was very surprised to know what it was. A hijab, not to be confused with hijab, is a sort of magic charm that veils its user from harm and protects them from evil spirits. And in some occasions, it could also work as a bringer of love, appreciation, and service for other people. When my friend told me the story, I was instantly intrigued. For all my life, I've been curious about these things, although I do not believe them and still do not to this day. I wanted to see if the spell would work. I took the piece of paper from him, gave it a quick scan to see what it was all about. I gave it back to him, tell him to keep it until we get back home and see what it's about. When we did get back home, we opened it again and read it another time, more closely. The wording is quite weird and hard to decipher, not to mention it's got some weird symbols. One in the shape of a cross, the other is the shape of the Othala ruin. The other two are in the shape of something I couldn't decipher, but they look like an unequal sign, only with 3 horizontal lines in the middle. Upon closer inspections, the words we could manage to decipher translate to something like this: "O God, I have sacrificed this unborn child for you to bring your servants. O most great one, to bring unto him acceptance, love, and victory." The servants referred to here are the Jinn, to whom whoever made this spell wished to appoint the job of bringing the man who gave it to my friend good luck and fortune. When Medai read that, he interpreted the supposed sacrifice of an unborn child as bringing the crazy man the love that children get from others. Medai was scared, but I was unbothered, seeing it as nothing but pointless words that have no meaning. But since my friend is really scared because the spell was given to him, he consulted with his roommate, a psychology student, who advised him to burn the spell to break it if it had any real effect, and to relieve himself from any unwelcome thoughts that it would invite into his mind if it was kept on him. Medai and I went to the roof of the house and burned the spell together. Skip forward a couple days, Medai and I are walking together back to the usual cafe we sit in, and for some reason he told me to go down the path we never took before. That is completely the opposite side of where we live. I said yeah, and we went for a walk until we arrived at that same villa he had gotten the piece of paper from. And we saw the same guy that gave him the spell standing behind the fence with his face behind the bars of the steel and staring aimlessly at nothing. At this point, Medai and I no longer cared about the supposed hex or curse he had cast on us. So we agreed to approach the guy and speak to him. The moment he saw us, he called us as we were approaching him, and we started talking to him. He introduced himself as Hamid. The villa is supposedly his uncle's, and so is another cafe in front of it. We didn't believe him, as he is obviously not all sane in the head. He can speak and understand well enough, but something about his empty, emotional gaze and super relaxed posture, as if he doesn't have a single care in the world, as well as the way he speaks, completely spontaneously without thinking, screams instantly. We asked him about the piece of paper he had given us. He said a police officer gave it to him, an obvious lie. We told him we took the piece of paper to a fiqh, a Moroccan Islamic version of priest, and he simply answered something akin to, "Yeah, sure you did." He saw right through our lie. As we were talking, he started giving us commands as if we were his servants, but doing so in a completely straightforward, non-condescending way, as if it's just natural for him to ask people for things and get him things for free. He asked us to get him a simple soft drink from the nearby grocery, to which we declined, but he insisted. So we told him to wait until tomorrow and we'll get it for him. Fast forward to the next day. We go past the villa again and he's there, his head between the steel bars of the fence, again staring aimlessly at nothing, his big round eyes and toothless mouth agape. We saw him, said our hellos, and immediately started giving us commands. "Go and get my drink now." His commands became more assertive, but still non-condescending and straightforward. The way he speaks is like that of a child. So we told him to ask us nicely and we'd get it for him. He did. We went and got his drink. When he got it, he simply threw it on the ground and asked us for a bar of soap. We asked him what he wanted to do with the soap. He said he'll be going to a traditional bathhouse and needs soap to clean himself. So we got him the soap and he threw it on the ground next to him. He asked for something else and we said, "That's enough, we're going back home." And we did. I'm writing this all out right now, waiting for my friend Medai to come over so we can visit the guy again. My friend and I joked about the hex having actually worked on us, and that's why we brought the stuff for him yesterday, and are going to visit him again tonight, too. But something deep inside of me questions me about it actually being true. What if we did actually get hexed, and now we're servants to this crazy homeless guy living in an abandoned villa? I actually brought some pizza earlier, and I only ate one slice. Now I'm keeping it for the crazy guy we are going to meet. In fact, it's very likely that the spell did not work, and we're just doing this because we think it's fun and like talking to the guy, but I can't help but think the spell did work. Here's what I'm thinking happened, alright? And if you guys agree, comment in the comments below. But I'm thinking that Medai got this hex, right? And if he hadn't showed it to his friend and another friend, and the other friend told him to burn it and cleanse his mind, that chances are he would have been hexed. And now they are not, and they are doing it because they're young. I mean, they're college kids, you know. College kids do dumb stuff. Like he said, maybe we're just doing it because we're fascinated and talk to the guy. We like talking to him, you know, for shits and giggles. But I really honestly think that the hex was broken by it being burned. Had he eaten that candy and not burned it, he probably would have been under the spell of this guy. And I think the guy actually thought that the hex worked because he saw the two come back, and that's why he started commanding. Which is kind of strange, because if they were under the hex, why would they just, you know, kind of BS with him and say, "Ask us nicely and we'll get it for you"? And he should have right then and there, excuse me, right then and there, knew the hex was broken at that point, you know? It's crazy. Today's fourth experience on the paranormal side. When I was younger, maybe 9 years old, I spent the whole day at the local fair. I was showing my 4-H animals, and because my shirt was itchy, I had gone to my parents' car to change it. For some reason, there was just this old man next to the car. Though I hadn't put much thought into it, this guy didn't give much of an explanation, but asked me to get into his truck. I hadn't been really educated on kidnapping and stuff like that. I knew it wasn't a good idea to trust strangers, so I quickly said no thank you, finished changing before running off. Fast forward several hours later, and once I was done hanging out with some friends, I went back to the car for it to be gone. For context, I never had a good relationship with my parents, and I really shouldn't have been living with them with all they've done to me. Of course, I was worried and really didn't have any way to get home but walk. But that old man was still there. He said that he knew my parents, even said their names, and said that he was going to take me home since they had forgotten about me. Being a small town in Ohio, it didn't take much for anyone to know each other, especially when your grandfather was the favorite high school teacher forever, basically. So I really didn't question him, and I jumped in. It was at this time that I noticed the first weird thing besides him still being in that same spot as earlier. As if he knew it was going to happen, his face would almost change, if that makes sense. Never appearing quite the same as it had only a few minutes before, yet still recognizably being him. Of course, he didn't take me home, but instead to his house. Besides the normal kidnapping crap, there weren't many things off about this. We were seemingly phasing in and out of traffic, as if we weren't entirely there. Another thing of note is that when we finally did get to the destination, at first we had just turned into a cornfield before a small path, just barely large enough for the truck. It was as if we were entering some otherworldly place, that I was witnessing something that really I shouldn't have. At that point of him shutting the truck off, I had understood that I had been kidnapped, but something about him just made it feel so calm. Like I knew that nothing was going wrong in his presence, like no harm would come to me. My time there was, for a lack of a more fitting word, perfect. I had no worry of getting hurt from my parents, no stress to be as perfect as possible, no worry that every little thing I did wrong or forget would hurt me. I got to do whatever I wanted, play games with him or bake or help him around the house or anything else my brain could come up with. Eventually the time came when I realized that I really needed to go back. No matter how perfect it was, I couldn't stay here any longer, simply just because I needed to get back home. Thus, I left as soon as I knew he had fallen asleep. And just as we came into the corn parted, just large enough for me to pass through, while some fireflies fluttered about as if to light my path. It took me what felt like days to get back home, though it was probably only a few hours since night hadn't broken. The whole time it felt as if I was pulled into two separate directions, one down what I assumed the proper path home, and the lighter pull back to the farmhouse. I kept trudging forward, and the moment I reached home, the moment dawn broke, the tether to the farmhouse was gone. After managing to somehow get inside, I learned something horrifying. I had been there for 10 days, and just as suddenly as I disappeared, I reappeared. Years later, around 11 this time, at night, while out with friends, I noticed that I was near the magical cornfield and kind of just went over to it, expecting something to happen. But nothing did. The corn simply swayed in the wind. And even going deep enough into it, I should have been able to find the house there. There was nothing, no clearing, no beat-up truck, no kind old man. I want to say this was just a delusion of a scared kid, and that trauma has made me misremember some or most of the details, but it just doesn't feel right. Still to this day, I see him sometimes. But it's always out of the corner of my eye or passing by in the streets, only for me to turn around and either the person has a complete different appearance, where the person just isn't there altogether. What the heck? Was this person kidnapped by an angel? I mean, or a reptilian? What? I just don't understand. I mean, that's crazy. This one's gonna leave me boggled for a while now until I think long and hard about it. Wow. Wow. And wow. Because if it was an angel, he wouldn't have slept, you know? Unless it was that little kid's time to go and he kind of just faked being asleep. But if it was a reptilian, I don't think the kid would be able to sneak out, you know? What the heck? That's creepy. That is some paranormal creepy stuff, if I ever heard it. Let's end this paranormal side with a cryptid encounter. I'll never forget the night of August 14th, 2021. I was fishing the river with my friend in suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. We loved coming to this public park to fish because it was quiet and there was a nice sandbar to fish from. This park had a Sioux burial mound about a half a mile from our spot. After fishing for the better part of the day, we decided to leave at dusk. In order to get back to our vehicles, we had to take the trail through the woods, which was about a 5-minute walk. I put a clip light on my bill of my hat so we could see the trail. I remember when I first glanced ahead down the trail, I saw 2 circular white lights that I assumed were fireflies. Once we got further down the trail, we were closer to the area where I had seen the fireflies. It was then I saw a pair of eyes that were either highly reflective from my light or glowing white. It wasn't long before I could make out a body. It was a very large white body on 4 legs, bigger than a wolf, but unnaturally skinny. I couldn't make out any facial features because its eyes were so bright. I wanted to warn my friend, but all I could manage to say was, "There's something there." We had no choice but to proceed because this was the only way back to our vehicles. This thing just stared us down but didn't make a sound. My friend yelled at it to try to scare it away, but it didn't react at all. I yelled it after she did, and it responded back, mimicking my voice. I honestly questioned myself and thought I was imagining things. So I yelled at it again, and it responded back in the same volume, same pitch, exactly like my voice. At this point, we realized this was not an animal. We both continued on the path in silence, but I maintained eye contact with the creature. I felt like this thing was ready to attack us at any moment, but it was just staring at us, standing there. Eventually, we were out of the woods, and I could no longer see its eyes. We made it back to our vehicles, and felt a sense of relief. I asked my friend, "Did you hear that thing talk back at me?" She said she did, and it sounded just like my voice when it responded. If she hadn't heard the voice, I would have assumed I imagined it. We went over what had happened, and our stories were the same, except she said the creature had a wolf-like head. After our experience, my friend, who was Hmag, went to see a shaman. The shaman believed it was an evil spirit and performed a cleansing on her. She was still shaken by the experience after several weeks. I tried to hire a spiritual advisor online, but when I described the experience and asked for a spiritual cleansing of my own, they said, "Not available at this time." At the advice of one of my friends, I burnt some tobacco and said a prayer that the entity would leave me alone. It took me several months just to feel normal again, but I still think about it on a weekly basis. I've tried to do further research and contact management from the park. They said the park we went to had an ancient Indian burial ground and remains scattered along the river that were unmarked. They said there were more Native American remains in the park than any other park they had managed. I contacted several Native American friends, and I still don't know what I've encountered.
All right, folks, just an assortment of absolutely very interesting but very terrifying experiences. I hope you all enjoyed them as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and honestly, what gives people a chance to share their experiences, ideas, and theories, judgment and ridicule free, just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they're definitely dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.